Delete that one. Rebecca doesn't fit our family image, my mother said coldly as the photographer removed another photo from the wedding album preview. My own mother was systematically erasing me from my sister's wedding memories while I stood, frozen, invisible yet present, clutching my architecture degree that had somehow become worthless in their eyes. The irony that would unfold just 8 months later, when they desperately needed my signature on documents for their dream retirement property, still astounds me to this day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood in the corner of Elaine Henderson photography studio, my presence acknowledged, yet deliberately ignored, as my parents and sister Caroline meticulously curated the perfect family wedding album. The photographer, a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes that occasionally darted sympathetically in my direction, methodically deleted photos containing my image as instructed. Perhaps we could keep just one with all family members, she suggested hesitantly. No, my father replied firmly. The album needs to present a certain standard. Rebecca's current situation doesn't align with our family values. My situation was graduating with honors in architecture during an economic downturn, forcing me to take a position at a local coffee shop while applying to firms across the country. In the Ellis family hierarchy, this temporary setback erased my academic achievements and rendered me unworthy of inclusion in family documentation. I was 26 years old, and for as long as I could remember, I had been measured against impossible standards of success. Standards my sister Caroline had seemingly effortlessly met by marrying James Whitfield, whose family owned one of the largest real estate development companies in the Northeast. The wedding 3 weeks ago had been an exercise in humiliation. I had been permitted to attend but instructed to remain in the background. No maid of honor role for the bride's only sister. No mention in the speeches. My parents had introduced me to their friends as our daughter who's finding her way, rather than our daughter the architect. The temporary barista position apparently negated my magna cum laude degree from Cornell. Mom, I said, finally finding my voice, these are Caroline's wedding photos. Shouldn't she decide who's included? Caroline looked up momentarily, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossing her features before she returned her attention to the album layout. Mom and Dad are paying for the album, she said softly. It's their decision. The photographer cleared her throat uncomfortably. I can step out for a moment if you'd like to discuss this privately. That won't be necessary, my father said. We're in agreement about the direction of the album. The systematic erasure continued for another 40 minutes. Each deleted image represented not just my exclusion from the wedding memories, but from the family narrative itself. By the time we left the studio, there would be no photographic evidence that Caroline Ellis had a sister named Rebecca. This exclusion wasn't new, though it had never been executed so blatantly before. Throughout our childhood, Caroline's achievements were framed and displayed prominently on the success wall in our family home. Debate trophies, academic awards, newspaper clippings of her community service initiatives. My equally impressive accomplishments were acknowledged briefly, then filed away, deemed somehow less significant. The pattern intensified when Caroline began dating James during her final year of college. The Whitfield connection elevated her status within our family to near-mythic levels. My parents began referring to themselves as the Whitfield's in-laws at social functions, their identities increasingly tied to this advantageous association. Meanwhile, my relationship with Thomas, a brilliant urban planner with innovative ideas but limited family connections, was treated as a youthful mistake. You could do better, Rebecca, my mother would say, someone more established. When Thomas and I broke up after 3 years due to the strain of my family's disapproval, my mother's response was, now you can focus on meeting someone with real potential. As we left the photography studio, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Horizon Architectural Firm in Chicago, an interview request for the following week. My heart raced as I read the details. Horizon was known for innovative, sustainable urban development projects, exactly the direction I wanted to take my career. I got an interview with Horizon in Chicago, I announced, unable to contain my excitement despite the tense atmosphere. My father checked his watch impatiently. Another interview? Didn't you just have one with some firm last month? This is different, Dad. Horizon is one of the top sustainable architecture firms in the country. Their urban renewal projects have won international awards. Well, let's hope something finally comes of this one, my mother remarked dismissively. Caroline, darling, we should head to lunch. The reservation at Le Ciel is for 1:30, and you know how James appreciates punctuality. The three of them walked ahead toward the parking lot, continuing a conversation about the Whitfields' upcoming charity gala as if I weren't present. I trailed behind, clutching my phone with the interview email like a lifeline. Rebecca. My father called over his shoulder. We only made reservations for 3. I'm sure you understand. It's a celebration of the album completion. I stopped walking. Something shifted inside me in that moment, a quiet but seismic realignment of my self-perception. For years, I had accepted these exclusions as somehow deserved, internalizing the message that I was less valuable because my path didn't align with their narrow definition of success. Actually, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. I have plans. I need to prepare for my interview. My mother's eyebrows rose slightly, the first indication that she had heard me challenge the established order in years. Well, that's proactive of you. We'll see you at Sunday dinner then. I won't be at Sunday dinner either, I continued, surprising even myself. I'll be in Chicago. You're flying to Chicago just for an interview? My father's tone conveyed both disbelief and disapproval. That seems excessive for a position you'll likely not get. The casual cruelty of his assumption struck me anew. Not because it was unusual, but because for the first time I recognized it for what it was. Not truth, but a narrative they had constructed and I had accepted. I'm staying with my friend Amelia, I explained, though I realized I owed them no explanation. She's been asking me to visit since she moved there last year. The interview aligns perfectly with her availability to show me around the city. Caroline looked genuinely interested for a moment. Amelia Chen, the one who started that urban development nonprofit? Yes, I nodded, somewhat surprised she remembered. She's doing amazing work with community-focused architecture in underserved neighborhoods. How charitable, my mother commented, somehow making the word sound like a character flaw rather than a virtue. As they turned to leave, Caroline hesitated. Rebecca, would you? Would you like me to call you after your interview, to hear how it went? The unexpected offer hung in the air between us. Caroline and I had been close as children before our parents' comparative assessments created a chasm neither of us knew how to bridge. This small gesture felt like a tentative plank extended across that divide. I'd like that, I said simply. Watching them drive away, I made a decision that would alter the course of my relationship with my family. Standing in that parking lot, still smarting from the methodical removal of my image from my sister's wedding memories, I resolved to no longer measure my worth through their distorted lens. I didn't yet know about the Whitfield Shores property my parents had already put a deposit on, the exclusive retirement community that would require all adult children's signatures due to its unusual family-centered ownership structure. I couldn't have predicted how their desperate need for my signature would reveal the transactional nature of their idea of family. All I knew in that moment was that I was reclaiming my narrative. One interview, one decision, one boundary at a time. The Chicago skyline greeted me through the airplane window, a jagged silhouette of ambition and possibility against the morning sky. As the plane descended, I pressed my palm against the cool glass, feeling strangely untethered, yet simultaneously more grounded than I had in years. First time in Chicago? The elderly woman beside me smiled warmly. Yes, I replied. I have a job interview. Well, good luck to you, dear. Chicago has a way of helping people find themselves. Her words lingered as I navigated O'Hare International Airport, rolling my carry-on past bustling terminals and hurried travelers. Each step carried me further from the suffocating expectations of Westlake, Connecticut, where success was measured by zip codes and social connections rather than personal fulfillment or genuine achievement. Amelia Chen was waiting at arrivals, her bright yellow jacket making her easy to spot in the crowd. When she saw me, her face broke into a wide smile, and she wrapped me in a tight hug that seemed to release something knotted inside my chest. Rebecca Ellis in the flesh, finally, she exclaimed, taking my suitcase. I was beginning to think your family had you under house arrest. The joke hit closer to home than she knew. Amelia and I had been roommates at Cornell, and she'd witnessed firsthand my parents' subtle manipulations and constant comparisons over the years. She'd been the one who encouraged me to apply to Horizon Architectural Firm despite my family's dismissal of my career aspirations. The emotional prison sentence has been commuted, I replied with a wry smile. Temporarily, at least. During the drive to her apartment in Logan Square, Amelia updated me on her nonprofit work while pointing out architectural landmarks. I found myself truly listening and engaging for the first time in months, free from the background anxiety that typically accompanied my conversations, the constant internal calculation of how to present my life in a way that might finally earn my parents' approval. You seem different, Amelia observed as we unloaded my luggage at her apartment. More present. I paused, considering her words. I think I'm starting to realize how much energy I've spent trying to gain acceptance from people who are constitutionally incapable of giving it. Hallelujah! Amelia raised her hands dramatically. The awakening begins. Her apartment reflected her personality, creative, unapologetic, and thoughtfully designed. Plants flourished in repurposed containers, sketches and blueprints covered. One wall and the furniture was an eclectic mix of vintage finds and modern pieces. Your interview isn't until tomorrow afternoon, she said, handing me a cup of coffee. So today, I'm giving you the Rebecca Recovery Tour of Chicago, all the architectural wonders that will remind you why you fell in love with this profession in the first place. The day that followed was transformative. We visited the Roby house, Amelia gesturing enthusiastically as she explained how Frank Lloyd Wright's Prairie School vision had revolutionized American architecture. At the Chicago Architecture Center, I found myself engaged in a passionate discussion with one of the docents about sustainable urban development, the very focus of my graduate thesis that my parents had dismissed as impractical idealism. You should hear her talk about community-integrated green spaces, Amelia told the impressed docent. She developed a model for urban parks that convert to water collection systems during heavy rainfall. Her professor submitted it to the American Institute of Architects. I felt a flush of pride at Amelia's words, not because she was praising me to a stranger, but because she remembered and valued work that had been meaningful to me. In that moment, I realized how starved I had been for simple acknowledgement. As the sun began to set, we found ourselves at the Chicago Riverwalk, watching the golden hour light play across the water and the surrounding buildings. I have a confession, Amelia said suddenly. I recommended you to someone at Horizon. An old classmate works there now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You did what? I turned to her, surprised. I just mentioned that I knew someone brilliant who was applying. That's all. She held up her hands defensively. Your portfolio did the real work. They wouldn't interview you if you weren't qualified. My parents would say that's cheating, I said automatically, then caught myself. God, listen to me. Even here, I'm filtering my experiences through their judgments. That's how conditioning works, Amelia replied gently. You've spent your whole life being told that your accomplishments only count if they're achieved in complete isolation, without community support. Meanwhile, Caroline marries into the Whitfield family and gets instant access to their entire network. But that's considered strategic brilliance rather than unfair advantage. Her observation struck me with the force of revelation. My parents had consistently praised Caroline for making connections and leveraging relationships, while simultaneously criticizing me for seeking mentorship or collaboration. The double standard was so embedded in our family dynamic that I had never questioned it until now. You know what the real difference is between you and Caroline? Amelia continued. She accepted the help that benefited her without questioning whether she deserved it. You've been rejecting support because you've internalized the idea that needing any assistance makes you somehow less worthy. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept returning to the day's conversations, connecting dots between past interactions with my family and my current self-perception. How many opportunities had I declined because accepting help made me feel inadequate? How many connections had I failed to nurture because I believed professional relationships should be earned rather than cultivated? Around midnight, my phone chimed with a text from Caroline. "How's Chicago? Still on for our call tomorrow after your interview?" Her unexpected follow-through on our parting conversation surprised me. I responded with a brief update about exploring the city, ending with, "Yes, I'd like to talk tomorrow." Her reply came quickly. "Good luck with Horizon. Their urban sustainability projects are impressive." I stared at her message, stunned that she had taken the time to research the firm. It was the first indication in years that she might see me as more than competition in our parents' approval economy, that she might actually be interested in my life and aspirations. Morning brought an email from my mother. "Your father and I expect a full report on your interview. Remember to emphasize your connection to the Ellis name. Your grandfather's contributions to the Connecticut Architectural Review Board still carry weight in professional circles." The contrast between Caroline's simple encouragement and my mother's strategic positioning instruction couldn't have been clearer. One acknowledged me as an individual with my own path. The other viewed me as an extension of the family brand. As I prepared for the interview, selecting my most professional outfit from the limited options in my suitcase, Amelia leaned against the bathroom doorframe. "Whatever happens today," she said, watching me apply minimal makeup, "remember that you're already succeeding by your own definition. You created a vision of architecture that serves communities rather than just wealthy clients. You're pursuing that vision despite every discouragement. That's already remarkable." The Horizon architectural firm occupied 3 floors of a sustainably retrofitted historical building in the West Loop. As I entered the light-filled reception area, I was struck by the display of ongoing projects, urban renewal initiatives, affordable housing with green spaces, community centers built with recycled materials. This was architecture with purpose beyond prestige, exactly what I had been drawn to since my first design class. "Rebecca Ellis?" A woman with silver-streaked hair and architect's glasses approached. "I'm Diana Patel, Director of Urban Development. We're delighted you could come in person." The interview itself was unlike any I had experienced. Instead of the standard questions about career goals and strengths, Diana and her team engaged me in a substantive discussion about my thesis project and how its principles might apply to their current initiatives in formerly industrial neighborhoods. "What impressed us about your portfolio," Diana said near the end of our conversation, "was the clear ethic behind your designs. We have plenty of applicants with technical skills, but fewer with a coherent vision for architecture as community, service." As I left the building 2 hours later, I felt a curious lightness. Regardless of whether I received an offer, the interview had affirmed something essential. There were professional communities where my values and approach were not just accepted, but actively sought after. My parents' dismissal of my career direction reflected their limitations, not mine. Caroline called as promised while I was walking back to Amelia's apartment. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine interest. As I described the interview, sharing my excitement about Horizon's community-focused projects, I realized I was speaking to my sister without the usual guardedness, without filtering my experiences to minimize potential criticism or comparison. "It sounds perfect for you," she said when I finished. "You've always cared about the impact of design on everyday people. Even your pillow forts when we were kids had designated community gathering spaces." The childhood memory, shared with affection rather than comparison, created a momentary bridge across years of competitive distance. "Caroline," I said impulsively, "why did you let them exclude me from your wedding album?" The question hung between us, honest in a way our conversations rarely were. She paused, and I could hear her struggling to formulate a response. "I told myself it was easier to go along with them, that it wasn't worth the fight, but the truth is, I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Her unexpected apology cracked something open between us, a possibility of relationship beyond our parents' orchestration. As we ended the call, I felt an unfamiliar sense of hope that perhaps at least one family relationship might be reclaimed on new terms. That evening, Amelia and I celebrated the interview with deep dish pizza and local beer at a neighborhood tavern. Amid our conversation about architecture and Chicago neighborhoods, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my father demanding updates and emphasizing the importance of securing this position to restore the family's faith in my career path. I placed my phone face down on the table, choosing instead to be fully present in this moment of authentic connection and possibility. The Chicago skyline glittered through the tavern window, a landscape of human ambition and creativity, reminding me that there were entire worlds beyond my parents' narrow definition of success. 2 days after my interview, I received the email that would change everything. Diana Patel's name appeared in my inbox with the subject line, "Horizon Architectural Firm, Position Offer." My hand trembled slightly as I opened it, sitting cross-legged on Amelia's couch while she prepared breakfast in the kitchen. "We are pleased to offer you the position of Junior Design Architect on our Urban Renewal team. Your vision for community-integrated spaces and sustainable design principles align perfectly with our upcoming projects in the South Side Revitalization Initiative." The salary they offered exceeded my expectations, not exorbitant by architectural standards, but respectably competitive and more than enough to establish myself independently in Chicago. They requested a response within a week and mentioned a potential start date 1 month from now. "Amelia," I called, my voice unsteady. They offered me the job. She appeared in the doorway, spatula in hand, her expression shifting from curiosity to elation. "I knew it. Tell me everything." As I read the offer details aloud, the reality began crystallizing. This wasn't just employment, it was emancipation, financial independence, professional recognition, geographic distance from the toxic family dynamics that had defined my existence. "You have to take it," Amelia declared, sitting beside me. "This is exactly the opportunity you've been working toward. Meaningful architecture with social impact, not just luxury buildings for people who already have everything." "I know," I said, a smile growing despite the anxiety fluttering in my chest. "But my family will see it as rebellion rather than achievement. Moving to Chicago instead of staying in Connecticut where they can monitor and control my progress." Amelia's expression softened. "Rebecca, at what point do you get to live your life for yourself rather than as a character in their narrative?" Her question hung in the air, simple yet profound. I had spent my entire life trying to earn approval from people who moved the goalposts with each achievement. My academic honors, my design awards, my dedication to architecture that served communities. None of it had ever been enough because their definition of success had nothing to do with accomplishment and everything to do with maintaining their control. I'm taking it, I decided aloud, the declaration itself an act of self-reclamation. I'm accepting the offer. The immediate practical concerns, finding an apartment, planning the move, calculating expenses, provided welcome distraction from the inevitable family confrontation ahead. Amelia connected me with a realtor friend who specialized in helping young professionals find affordable housing in promising neighborhoods. By that afternoon, we had scheduled viewings for the following day in Pilsen, a historically significant area known for its vibrant arts community and architectural character. Now comes the hard part, Amelia said as we returned to her apartment that evening. Telling your family. I had been avoiding this conversation, letting my parents' increasingly impatient texts go unanswered beyond brief reassurances that I was still considering options. But with apartment viewings scheduled and the acceptance email drafted in my inbox, the moment could no longer be postponed. I decided to call rather than text, wanting to control the narrative rather than giving them time to construct a unified response strategy. My father answered on the third ring. Rebecca. Finally. Your mother and I were beginning to think you'd forgotten where you came from. His opening salvo, the immediate suggestion that geographic distance equated to disloyalty, confirmed. I had made the right decision by creating this conversation on my terms. Actually, Dad, I've been busy accepting a position with Horizon Architectural Firm. They've offered me a role on their urban renewal team. Silence stretched for several seconds before he responded, his tone carefully modulated. I see, and you didn't think to consult with us before making such a decision? I'm consulting you now, I replied evenly. I'm informing you of my decision as a professional courtesy. Professional courtesy? My father's voice rose slightly. We're your parents, not business associates. This family has certain expectations. Robert, is that Rebecca? My mother's voice interrupted in the background, put her on speaker. The quality of the call changed as I was suddenly addressing both parents. Rebecca, darling, my mother began with dangerous sweetness. Your father and I are concerned about this impulsive decision. Chicago is so far from your support system, and the Morgenstern firm in Hartford expressed interest just last month. Charles Morgenstern and your father have been associates for years. The position wasn't right for me, I interjected, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Horizon's work aligns perfectly with my specialization in sustainable community development. Community development, my father repeated dismissively. Rebecca, architecture is about creating landmarks and legacies, not neighborhood playgrounds. The Ellis name has stood for prestige in New England architectural circles since your grandfather's time. My name is on my degree, my portfolio, and now my employment contract, I replied. And I'll be using it to design spaces that improve people's daily lives, not just monuments to wealth. My mother's sigh was theatrical. And what about family obligations? Sunday dinners? Holiday traditions? Caroline and James are expecting their first child in December. Surely you don't plan to miss becoming an aunt? The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. They had never framed family gatherings as meaningful traditions before, only as obligations where my achievements would be scrutinized and found wanting compared to Caroline's. I'll visit for important occasions, I said. And Chicago has airports. Caroline and James can bring the baby to visit once I'm settled. This is disappointingly selfish behavior, my father declared. After everything we've invested in your education, your upbringing, my education that you remind me at every opportunity was less expensive than Caroline's because I received scholarships? I challenged, naming the double standard for the first time. The upbringing where my achievements were filed away while hers were framed and displayed. That is a gross mischaracterization of, Dad, I was systematically removed from my sister's wedding album 3 days ago because my current employment doesn't reflect the family image. Don't talk to me about mischaracterization. The fight? Silence that followed told me I had struck a nerve, named an uncomfortable truth they couldn't easily dismiss. My mother recovered first. "You're clearly emotional right now, Rebecca. We should discuss this when you return home and can approach the situation rationally." "I am approaching this rationally," I countered. "I've accepted an excellent position with a respected firm in my specialized field. I'll be starting in 4 weeks, which means I need to find housing and arrange my relocation. These are rational adult decisions." "And what if we don't support this decision?" my father asked, the implicit threat hanging in his words. "Then I'll miss you," I answered simply. "But I'll still be moving to Chicago." After ending the call, I sat motionless on Amelia's balcony, watching the Chicago evening unfold below. People returning from work, meeting friends for dinner, walking dogs, living lives defined by their own choices rather than others' expectations. My hands trembled slightly with residual adrenaline, but my mind felt curiously clear. "That sounded intense," Amelia said, joining me with 2 glasses of wine. "You okay?" "I think I actually am," I replied, accepting the glass. "It's like I've been speaking a foreign language with them my entire life, carefully translating my experiences into terms they might approve of. Tonight I just stopped translating." My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "Mom and Dad just called, upset about your Chicago news. Congratulations on the job. It sounds perfect for you. Don't let them undermine this." Her unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. Perhaps there was hope for salvaging at least one family relationship on healthier terms. Throughout the next day's apartment viewings, my phone continuously lit up with increasingly desperate communications from my parents. My father's messages emphasized family legacy and obligation. My mother alternated between guilt-inducing reminders of family events I would miss and thinly veiled warnings about the professional connections I was sacrificing. I found myself drawn to a small but architecturally significant apartment in Pilsen, a converted space in a former artist's studio with exposed brick walls, large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light, and original hardwood floors. The rent was reasonable, the location vibrant, and most importantly, it felt nothing like the sterile perfection of my parents' Connecticut neighborhood. "I'll take it," I told the realtor, feeling the thrill of another autonomous decision. That evening, as Amelia and I celebrated with takeout and planning discussions about furniture needs and moving logistics, my phone rang with my father's number. "Should I answer?" I asked Amelia. "Your choice," she replied. "But remember, every interaction is teaching them how to treat you going forward." I answered with a clear, "Hello," not the anxious greeting I would have used a week earlier. "Rebecca," my father began, his tone uncharacteristically conciliatory. "Your mother and I have been discussing your opportunity in Chicago. While we still have reservations about the distance, we recognize this could be a valuable experience for your early career development." The sudden shift in position made me instantly suspicious. My parents had never readily accepted any decision that took me beyond their sphere of influence. "I appreciate that," I said cautiously. "In fact," he continued, "we'd like to support your transition. Perhaps we could help with the security deposit on a suitable apartment in a proper neighborhood. Lincoln Park, perhaps, or the Gold Coast. Areas far from the community-focused neighborhood I had chosen, in the most expensive parts of the city, where they could justify frequent visits to check on their investment." The strings attached to this offer were practically visible. "Thank you, but I've already secured an apartment in Pilsen," I replied. "It's perfect for my needs." His momentary silence spoke volumes. "Pilsen? Isn't that a rather transitional area?" "It's a historically and architecturally significant neighborhood with a vibrant arts community and excellent transit access to my new office," I countered. exactly the kind of urban environment that aligns with my professional interests. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "speaking of property matters, there's something your mother and I need to discuss with you. A family investment opportunity that requires your attention before you leave." And there it was, the real reason for this call, for the sudden acceptance of my decision. They needed something from me. "What kind of investment opportunity?" I asked, making eye contact with Amelia, who raised her eyebrows at my expression. "It's rather complex to explain over the phone. We'll discuss it when you return. When will you be back in Connecticut?" "I fly back tomorrow afternoon," I answered. "But I'll be busy with resignation procedures at the coffee shop and packing arrangements." "This takes priority," my father stated, his tone reverting to its usual authoritative cadence. "Family dinner, Sunday at 6. We have important papers that require your signature." As the call ended, Amelia looked at me expectantly. "They suddenly support my move to Chicago," I explained, "and coincidentally need my signature on important papers for some family investment opportunity." Amelia snorted. "Amazing how quickly principals become flexible when they need something, isn't it?" The observation was cutting in its accuracy. For years, I had been excluded from family decisions, my input dismissed as irrelevant compared to Caroline's business acumen or my parents' experience. Now, suddenly, my signature had value, which meant this document, whatever it was, legally required my participation. For the first time, I found myself entering a family negotiation with leverage I hadn't asked for but would not hesitate to use. Whatever awaited me in Connecticut, I would be facing it as Rebecca Ellis, Horizon architect with a signed lease in Chicago, not as the perpetually inadequate younger daughter desperately seeking approval. The realization straightened my posture and calmed my breathing. I was no longer approaching this interaction from a position of emotional deficit. Whatever they needed from me would be evaluated on my terms, not theirs. "To family dinner, then," I said, raising my glass to Amelia. "Let's see what's so important they suddenly need to include the daughter they just erased." The familiar landscape of Connecticut greeted me through the train window as I traveled, from the airport toward my hometown of Westlake. The rolling green hills and manicured estates that had once represented comfort now felt like carefully constructed facades, beautiful surfaces concealing complicated power dynamics and conditional relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "Fair warning. Mom and Dad have been meeting with their financial advisor and attorney all week. Whatever they're planning, it's significant. Call if you need backup." Her message reinforced my growing suspicion that this family investment opportunity was no small matter. Caroline's offer of support, so different from our previously competitive dynamic, suggested she too had begun recognizing the manipulation tactics that had kept us at odds for years. I had spent my final day in Chicago meeting with Horizon's HR department to finalize employment details and signing the lease on my Pilsen apartment. Each signature had felt like a declaration of independence, a concrete step toward building a life defined by my own values rather than my parents' expectations. Now, returning to Connecticut felt like temporarily stepping back into a role I had outgrown, but with a crucial difference. I was no longer seeking approval. I was negotiating as an equal. The Ellis family home stood as it always had, a stately, colonial with perfect symmetry and immaculate landscaping. No detail was ever out of place. My mother maintained our home with the same precision with which she maintained appearances. As I walked up the familiar path, I noticed small changes. New plantings in the garden beds, a different color on the front door, subtle signals that life had continued in my absence. My mother answered my knock, her expression a careful blend of warmth and restraint. "Rebecca, darling, you're looking rested. Chicago seems to agree with you." The pause before rested spoke volumes. She had nearly said something else, thin, perhaps, or pale, some subtle criticism disguised as concern. The city has been invigorating, I replied, stepping inside. Architecturally fascinating. Of course. She smiled tightly. Your father is in his study with Mr. Harrington. They're just finalizing some documents before dinner. Mr. Harrington, the family attorney? I asked, my suspicions growing. I thought this was a family dinner, to discuss an investment opportunity. It is, dear. James and Caroline will be joining us shortly. The Whitfields may stop by for dessert as well. Your father just wanted Mr. Harrington to explain some of the technical aspects of the arrangement. The casual mention of the Whitfields, Caroline's in-laws, joining for dessert confirmed this was no ordinary family matter. The Whitfields only attended Ellis gatherings for significant occasions or when business interests aligned. I followed my mother to the kitchen, where she busied herself with dinner preparations that were largely ceremonial. The actual cooking had likely been done by Mrs. Diaz, who had managed our household for as long as I could remember. So, I said, leaning against the counter, what exactly is this investment opportunity that suddenly requires my signature? My mother's hands paused briefly before resuming their careful arrangement of roasted vegetables on a serving platter. Your father should really be the one to explain. It's quite an exciting development for the family. I'd appreciate a general overview before being presented with documents to sign, I persisted. She sighed, setting down her serving tongs. It's about Whitfield Shores. The retirement community development that James's family has been planning on the coast? I asked, recalling mentions of this project at Caroline's wedding. Yes. Construction begins next month on the first phase. It's going to be the most exclusive senior living community in New England. Private beach access, world-class healthcare facilities on site, architectural details that honor the historical character of the region while incorporating modern luxury. Her description sounded like a sales brochure, which heightened my wariness. And what does this have to do with me? Before she could answer, the front door opened, and Caroline's voice called out a greeting. Moments later, she appeared in the kitchen doorway, followed by James, tall, conventionally handsome, and perpetually well-dressed in the understated way that signaled old money. Rebecca, Caroline embraced me with genuine warmth. You look fantastic. Chicago clearly suits you. Careful, I murmured in her ear. You'll ruin my reputation as the family disappointment. She pulled back with a surprised laugh, the kind of authentic reaction rarely heard in this house of careful performances. James extended his hand formally. Congratulations on your position with Horizon. Their sustainable design approach is generating significant interest in development circles. His knowledge of my new employer caught me off guard. James had never shown interest in my career before, dismissing community-focused architecture as admirable but impractical during previous family discussions. Thank you, I replied, shaking his hand. Their integration of environmental sustainability with community economic development is creating new models for urban renewal. Speaking of development, my father's voice came from the doorway. Dinner will provide an excellent opportunity to discuss the Whitfield Shores opportunity. He entered the kitchen, followed by Mr. Harrington, a silver-haired man whose law firm had managed Ellis family legal matters for 2 generations. The attorney nodded politely in my direction before setting his briefcase on a side table. Dinner proceeded with the usual Ellis family choreography, precise servings, appropriate wine pairings, and conversation carefully steered toward acceptable topics. My mother inquired about my apartment. Pilsen has such character, I'm sure. While my father asked pointed questions about Horizon's client base and market position. I answered truthfully but selectively, protecting my new beginning from their inevitable attempts to diminish it. Only after dessert was served did my father finally address the reason for this gathering. As you know, he began, folding his hands on the table, the Whitfield Corporation has been developing an exceptional retirement community on prime oceanfront property. Whitfield Shores represents the pinnacle of luxury senior living, a limited number of residences for discerning individuals who appreciate exclusivity and refinement in their retirement years. Caroline caught my eye briefly, her expression suggesting she found our father's promotional tone as transparent as I did. The investment structure for this development is unique, Mr. Harrington interjected. Rather than traditional financial backing, the Whitfield Corporation has created a family-centered ownership model for the founding residents. What does that mean exactly? I asked. My father continued, "It means that when your mother and I secure our residence at Whitfield Shores, we're not merely purchasing property, we're investing in a multi-generational family asset. The legal framework requires commitment from all adult children to maintain the integrity of the community standards." Commitment in what form? I pressed, though I was beginning to understand exactly why my signature had suddenly become valuable. Mr. Harrington opened his briefcase and removed a thick document bound in an expensive leather portfolio. The Whitfield Shores Family Covenant, he explained, requires signatures from all adult family members of founding residents. It ensures continuity of ownership and community standards through subsequent generations. We've already placed a substantial deposit, my mother added. The residence we've selected has the most desirable orientation, southern exposure, unobstructed ocean views, and proximity to the community clubhouse. Our unit will be ready next year, my father continued. The timing is perfect. We'll be among the first residents, establishing our position in the community hierarchy from the beginning. I reached for the document, which Mr. Harrington slid across the table. May I review the details? Of course, the attorney replied, though I should mention that the final signature deadline is this Tuesday. The Whitfield Corporation begins groundbreaking ceremonies on Wednesday. As I opened the portfolio, Caroline spoke up unexpectedly. Rebecca should have adequate time to review a binding legal document, especially one with multi-generational implications. Our parents exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this intervention. I began scanning the document, quickly identifying the concerning clauses buried within the legal language. The covenant didn't merely ensure community standards. It created binding financial obligations for all signatories. Adult children of founding residents would be legally required to maintain the property, according to specific standards, should the parents become unable to do so. Moreover, the property couldn't be sold to non-approved buyers, and any future care costs not covered by the parents' resources would become the legal responsibility of the children who had signed. This isn't just a signature acknowledging your retirement choice, I said, looking up at my parents. This is a binding financial commitment that could potentially obligate me to significant expenses in the future. It's a formality, my father dismissed. Our financial resources are more than adequate for any contingency. Then why is my signature necessary? I challenged. It's simply how the Whitfield Corporation has structured the ownership model, James interjected smoothly. All adult family members must be signatories to ensure community integrity. I continued reading, finding more troubling details. According to this, if you require extended health care beyond what your resources can cover, Caroline and I would be equally responsible for the additional costs, regardless of our individual financial situations at that time. The likelihood of such a scenario is extremely remote, Mr. Harrington assured me. But not impossible, I countered. And given that you've already placed a non-refundable deposit, my mother's expression tightened. Rebecca, this is the retirement community we've chosen. The location is perfect, the amenities exceptional. The Whitfields themselves will be our neighbors. The deposit is substantial, my father added, his tone growing impatient. Nearly $700,000, non-refundable at this stage. The amount stunned me into momentary silence. $700,000, committed without discussion with the very family members who would be legally bound by this decision. You invested $700,000 in a property that requires my legal commitment without consulting me first? I asked, unable to keep the incredulity from my voice. We didn't think you'd be difficult about a simple signature, my mother replied, her tone hardening. After all we've done for you. What my wife means, my father interrupted, shooting her a warning glance, is that family supports family. This is our retirement dream. All we need is your signature to secure our future comfort. I looked at Caroline, who met my gaze with unexpected steadiness. I haven't signed yet either, she revealed quietly. I've been asking for clarification on certain aspects of the covenant. This revelation shifted the dynamic in the room immediately. My parents had clearly expected to present us with a united front, their decision supported by Caroline and James, with only my signature remaining as a formality. Instead, they faced unexpected resistance from both daughters. Perhaps, Mr. Harrington suggested diplomatically, Rebecca and Caroline would like to review the document in detail together. We could reconvene tomorrow to address any questions. Tomorrow is Sunday, my father objected. Your office isn't open on Sundays. I can make an exception for the Ellis family, the attorney replied smoothly. As the tension in the room mounted, I closed the document and slid it back across the table. I need time to review this properly, preferably with my own attorney. Your own attorney? My mother's voice rose slightly. Rebecca, this is a family matter. A family matter with significant legal and financial implications, I countered, calmly. If it's truly a formality as you claim, then allowing proper review should pose no problem. James cleared his throat, glancing at his watch. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow, when everyone has had time to consider the details more thoroughly. His diplomatic intervention, clearly designed to de-escalate the situation, signaled that even he recognized the inappropriateness of pressuring for immediate signatures on such a significant document. As my parents reluctantly agreed to postpone further discussion until the following day, I caught Caroline's eye again. The slight nod she gave me confirmed what I was beginning to understand. This was not merely about a retirement community signature. This was a pivotal moment in redefining our family power dynamic, one that would shape all future interactions. For the first time, my parents needed something from me that they couldn't obtain through manipulation or pressure. My signature, previously deemed worthless on family photos, had suddenly become essential to their social aspirations and retirement plans. As we moved to the living room for coffee, I felt a strange new sensation, the calm certainty of holding legitimate power in a relationship that had always positioned me as powerless. Whatever happened next would occur on different terms than any previous family negotiation, terms that included recognition of my autonomy and worth. The next morning dawned with unusual clarity for Connecticut in early spring, blue skies and crisp air that seemed to mirror my newfound mental clarity. I had spent half the night reviewing the Whitfield Shores family covenant, carefully highlighting concerning clauses and researching similar retirement community structures online. What I discovered only confirmed my initial suspicions. This wasn't merely a signature of acknowledgement, but a binding intergenerational commitment with significant financial implications. I awoke to a text from Caroline. Coffee at Westlake Roasters before the family meeting? 9:30? The invitation to meet privately before our scheduled family discussion at noon surprised me. Despite our brief moments of connection in recent days, Caroline and I had rarely sought each other's company without parental orchestration. I replied with a simple affirmative and prepared for what promised to be a pivotal day. Westlake Roasters occupied a converted Victorian house near the town center, its worn wooden floors and mismatched furniture providing a stark contrast to the polished perfection of my parents' preferred establishments. Caroline had already secured a quiet corner table when I arrived, 2 steaming mugs waiting. I ordered your usual oat milk latte with an extra shot, she said as I sat across from her. You remembered, I replied, genuinely touched by this small acknowledgement of my preferences. She smiled slightly. I remember more than you might think. An awkward silence followed as we both seemed to search for the right words to bridge. Years of parent-engineered competition and distance. I've been reviewing the covenant, I finally began, placing my annotated copy on the table between us. So have I, Caroline responded, producing her own marked document. Section 12. 4 is particularly concerning, the clause about shared financial responsibility for extraordinary healthcare costs. And 16.8, regarding property maintenance standards and mandatory upgrades, I added. The financial exposure is significant and open-ended. Caroline nodded. James says the model is designed to protect the exclusivity of the community, but... She hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. Even he thinks some of these provisions are excessive. This admission, that her husband had reservations about his own family's development project, revealed a crack in the unified front I had always perceived them to present. Why didn't you sign immediately? I asked directly. You usually align with whatever position gives you maximum parental approval. Instead of becoming defensive, Caroline looked down at her coffee. That observation isn't entirely inaccurate. Her candor surprised me. The Caroline I thought I knew would have deflected or countered with a comparison highlighting my own shortcomings. Things changed after the wedding, she continued quietly. Specifically, after the photo selection session. I waited, giving her space to elaborate. Watching them methodically erase you from what should have been family memories. It was like suddenly seeing a pattern that had always been there but I'd chosen to ignore. She met my gaze directly. I've been the successful daughter because I've made choices that aligned with their definition of success. But that day in the photography studio, I realized how conditional their approval really is. How easily I could be the one edited out if my decisions ever truly conflicted with their preferences. Her insight struck me with unexpected force. Caroline hadn't been immune to our parents' manipulation tactics. She had simply been more adept at navigating them, making choices that guaranteed approval while sacrificing authentic self-direction. The baby has changed my perspective too, she added, resting a hand briefly on her still flat abdomen. I keep imagining raising a child in that environment of constant evaluation and comparison. The thought is honestly terrifying. This vulnerable admission created an opening for authentic connection unlike anything we'd shared since childhood. What do you want to do about the covenant? I asked, refocusing on the immediate issue. I think we need to negotiate amendments, she replied, with unexpected decisiveness. Clear limitations on our financial liability, explicit provisions regarding decision-making authority for healthcare choices, and removal of clauses that bind future generations, our children, to community obligations they never consented to. Her analysis aligned perfectly with my own conclusions, suggesting that beneath our surface differences, Caroline and I shared fundamental values about autonomy and fairness. They won't easily accept amendments, I pointed out. They've already invested the deposit and publicly committed to being founding residents. Their social identity is wrapped up in being among the first Whitfield Shores occupants. True, Caroline acknowledged. But they need both our signatures by Tuesday. That gives us leverage we've never had before in family negotiations. Leverage is only useful if you're willing to use it, I noted. Are you prepared to withhold your signature if they refuse reasonable amendments? Caroline's expression reflected internal conflict, the conditioned desire to please our parents battling with newfound recognition of manipulative patterns. I don't want to destroy their retirement plans, she said carefully, but I also can't sign a document that potentially places my child's financial future at risk for the sake of maintaining appearances. As we continued discussing specific amendments and negotiation strategies, I realized we were engaging as allies for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. The artificial competition that had defined our relationship was dissolving in the face of a common challenge and shared values. By the time we arrived at our parents' home for the scheduled meeting, Caroline and I had developed a unified position and prepared a document outlining our required amendments to the covenant. Mr. Harrington was already present, along with James, and his father, Richard Whitfield, a significant escalation in pressure tactics. "Rebecca, Caroline," Richard Whitfield greeted us with corporate warmth. "I understand you have some questions about our family covenant. I thought I might provide clarification directly, given my personal investment in creating this unique community vision." His presence was clearly intended to intimidate. The patriarch of the Whitfield fortune rarely attended meetings that could be handled by subordinates. That he had chosen to involve himself personally revealed how important these founding signatures were to the project's timeline and marketing narrative. "We appreciate your time, Mr. Whitfield," I replied with professional courtesy, refusing to be intimidated. "We've reviewed the covenant thoroughly and have prepared a document outlining necessary amendments before we can proceed with signatures." My father's expression tightened at my directness, while my mother shot me a warning glance that would have silenced me just weeks ago. Today, it simply confirmed that I was taking the right approach. "Amendments?" Richard Whitfield's eyebrows rose slightly. "The covenant has been carefully crafted by our legal team to protect the integrity of the community. It's a standard document that all founding families are signing." "With respect," Caroline interjected smoothly, "several provisions extend beyond community protection into areas of significant financial exposure for signatories. As an attorney myself, though not practicing currently, I have concerns about the open-ended nature of these obligations." Her professional framing of our objections was masterful, invoking her legal background while maintaining a collegial tone that made outright dismissal difficult. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Perhaps we should review their specific concerns, Dad. If other potential residents have similar questions, addressing them now could prevent complications during the final signature phase." This subtle support from within the Whitfield family itself altered the dynamic immediately. Richard Whitfield gestured for our document, which Caroline handed to him with confident professionalism. As he reviewed our proposed amendments, my parents exchanged increasingly concerned glances. They had clearly anticipated a simple signature session, not a substantive negotiation that might delay or complicate their entry into the exclusive community. "These are fairly substantial modifications," Richard Whitfield finally commented, looking up from the document. "Particularly the sections limiting financial liability and removing the intergenerational binding clauses. They're necessary protections for both our families' futures," I stated firmly. "Caroline and I fully support our parents' choice to join Whitfield Shores. We simply can't commit to unlimited financial obligations or bind future generations to community standards they haven't consented to." "The covenant's strength lies in its comprehensive nature," Richard countered. "The exclusivity of Whitfield Shores depends on maintaining consistent standards across generations, which can still be accomplished through incentives rather than binding obligations," Caroline responded. "Future generations who value the community will naturally choose to maintain its standards. Those who don't shouldn't be legally forced to comply with values they don't share." My mother, unable to contain herself any longer, interjected with barely controlled frustration. "This is about securing our retirement in the community we've chosen. After everything we've done for both of you, this simple signature seems a small thing to ask." "It's not the signature that's at issue, Mom," I replied calmly. "It's the nature of the commitment attached to that signature. We're not refusing to support your retirement choice. We're ensuring that support doesn't come with unreasonable obligations." "What exactly are you suggesting?" my father demanded, his tone hardening. "That we forfeit our deposit and abandon our plans because you're unwilling to honor family obligations?" "Not at all," Caroline answered before I could respond. We're suggesting reasonable amendments that protect everyone's interests while still allowing you to proceed with your retirement plans. Richard Whitfield studied us thoughtfully before turning to Mr. Harrington. These amendments would require legal review and board approval. Could they be processed before Tuesday's deadline? The attorney hesitated, clearly calculating political implications. It would be challenging, but not impossible, assuming the modifications are accepted in principle today. And if they're not? I asked directly. Richard Whitfield's expression remained neutral, but his response was pointed. Then, unfortunately, your parents would lose their founding resident status and deposit. The next family on our waiting list would be offered their position. The implied threat hung in the air, precisely calibrated to trigger my parents' deepest fears: social exclusion and financial loss. In the past, such consequences would have been unthinkable. Family unity, on above their terms, would have been preserved at all costs. My mother turned to me, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. You would really allow us to lose our deposit and position over legal technicalities? After all the sacrifices we've made for you? The familiar guilt tactics felt almost comically transparent now, like watching a magician whose tricks I could finally see clearly. This isn't about technicalities, I replied evenly. It's about ensuring that your retirement choice doesn't create unreasonable burdens for future generations. If protecting your grandchildren's financial autonomy isn't worth negotiating reasonable amendments, then perhaps this reflects misaligned family priorities. My direct reference to their future grandchild, Caroline's baby, introduced an element they hadn't anticipated. My parents had always prioritized appearances and status, but the prospect of their grandchild bearing financial obligations for their retirement choices presented a new ethical dimension they couldn't easily dismiss. Perhaps, James suggested into the tense silence, we could review each proposed amendment individually, identifying those that might be accommodated more readily than others. His diplomatic intervention created a procedural path forward, transforming abstract opposition into specific negotiable points. For the next 2 hours, we systematically worked through our proposed amendments, with Richard Whitfield indicating which modifications might be acceptable to the board and which were non-negotiable from their perspective. Throughout this process, I observed my parents' gradual transition from outraged resistance to reluctant engagement. As we discussed specific liability limitations and decision-making authorities, they began offering substantive input rather than emotional appeals. By late afternoon, we had reached tentative agreement on a modified covenant that preserved the community standards the Whitfields required while providing the financial protections Caroline and I demanded. Mr. Harrington would prepare revised documents for review the following day, with final signatures contingent on approval of these amendments. As our guests departed, my parents remained in stony silence, neither accepting nor rejecting the compromise we had negotiated. The tension lingered in the air, thick with unspoken accusations and resentments. This wasn't about hurting you, I finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. It was about ensuring that your retirement choice remains sustainable for everyone involved. You could have cost us our deposit, my father replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. $700,000 and our position in the community. And you could have consulted us before committing to a contract that required our signatures, Caroline countered with unexpected firmness. This situation arose because you made assumptions about our compliance rather than engaging us as adults, with legitimate voices in family decisions. My mother looked between us, seemingly seeing something new in our united front. When did you two become so? She trailed off, unable to find an appropriate word that wasn't accusatory. Independent? I suggested. Aligned? Caroline offered simultaneously. The moment crystallized everything that had changed in recent weeks. We were no longer competitors for parental approval, but allies in establishing healthier family dynamics. A transformation that fundamentally threatened the control mechanisms our parents had relied on for decades. As Caroline and I left together, walking toward her car in the fading afternoon light, she surprised me by linking her arm through mine, a gesture of solidarity we hadn't shared since childhood. "They'll adjust eventually," she said quietly. "They don't really have a choice anymore." Her simple observation captured a profound truth. The leverage created by this signature requirement had permanently altered our family power dynamic. For the first time, our parents would need to engage with us as autonomous adults, rather than extensions of their own identities and ambitions. The negotiation had been about more than legal clauses in a retirement community covenant. It had been about rewriting the unspoken contract that had governed our family relationships for decades. A contract that was now, finally, subject to mutual consent rather than parental dictate. The revised Whitfield Shores Covenant arrived by courier the following morning, a testament to the urgency of our timeline and the influence of the Whitfield name in expediting legal processes. As I reviewed the document at the small desk in my childhood bedroom, I was struck by how thoroughly our amendments had been incorporated. The most concerning clauses regarding unlimited financial liability had been replaced with clearly defined parameters. The intergenerational binding provisions had been modified to require explicit consent from future adult family members, rather than automatic obligation. The maintenance standards remained stringent, but now included reasonable accommodation for financial hardship. A soft knock at my door interrupted my review. Caroline entered, already dressed for the day in a simple blue dress that highlighted her subtle pregnancy glow, a stark contrast to her usual corporate attire. "Have you reviewed the revisions?" she asked, settling into the window seat that had been her favorite reading spot during our shared childhood. "Just finishing now," I replied. "They've accepted almost everything we proposed. I'm actually surprised by how comprehensive the changes are." Caroline smiled knowingly. James mentioned that several other founding families had raised similar concerns, but lacked the legal background to articulate specific amendments. The Whitfields were already anticipating potential challenges to those clauses. Our timing was fortuitous. This revelation altered my understanding of the previous day's negotiations. What I had perceived as a unique family power struggle was actually part of a larger pattern. Other families had recognized the same concerning provisions, but perhaps lacked the leverage or expertise to successfully negotiate modifications. "Do you think Mom and Dad realize that?" I asked. "Unlikely," Caroline replied, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her dress. "They're still processing yesterday as a personal affront rather than a legitimate business negotiation." As if summoned. By our discussion, my mother appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully composed into neutral politeness, the mask she wore when navigating uncomfortable social situations. "Mr. Harrington will be arriving at 11 to finalize the documents," she announced. "Your father would like everyone assembled in the study by 10:30 to review the final changes." Her formal tone revealed the continuing tension from yesterday's confrontation. Rather than acknowledging the legitimate concerns that had prompted our amendments, she was treating the situation as a procedural inconvenience, frustrating but necessary to achieve her desired outcome. "We'll be there," Caroline assured her. "The revisions look comprehensive and address our primary concerns." My mother's expression flickered briefly, something like surprise crossing her features before the polite mask returned. "Well, good. That's good." She hesitated, then added with visible effort. "I suppose we should have discussed some of these details with you both earlier in the process." This grudging acknowledgement, not quite an apology but a rare admission of possible oversight, represented a small but significant shift. In the Ellis family lexicon, it was practically a declaration of wrongdoing. "That would have been helpful," I agreed, keeping my tone neutral rather than triumphant. Future family decisions with legal implications should probably involve all affected parties from the beginning. My mother nodded stiffly before retreating, leaving Caroline and me to exchange surprised glances at this minimal but unprecedented concession. Progress, Caroline murmured, however microscopic. The family gathering in my father's study proceeded with formal correctness. My father reviewed the amended covenant with clinical detachment, acknowledging the changes without expressing either approval or resentment. My mother maintained polite distance, serving coffee with the practiced grace she brought to all social obligations. The emotional firestorm of yesterday had been carefully contained, replaced by the civilized facade that had always characterized Ellis family conflict resolution, surface harmony concealing unaddressed tensions. When Mr. Harrington arrived, precisely at 11, the documents were ready for final review and signatures. As he explained the legal implications of each amendment, I observed my parents' reactions closely. Their expressions remained carefully neutral, but small tells revealed their internal adjustments. My father's gradually relaxing shoulders, my mother's decreasing frequency of nervous teacup adjustments. They were coming to terms with this new reality, recognizing that their adult daughters had successfully negotiated as equals rather than dependents. With these signatures, Mr. Harrington concluded, your parents' position as founding residents of Whitfield Shores will be secured, with the modified covenant addressing the concerns raised by Rebecca and Caroline. As we each signed in turn, my father first, then my mother Caroline, and finally myself, I was struck by the symbolism of the moment. My signature, deemed irrelevant for family photographs, now held equal weight in determining our collective future. The circular irony wasn't lost on me. After Mr. Harrington departed with the executed documents, an awkward silence settled over the study. None of us quite knew how to proceed following this fundamental shift in family dynamics. The script for Ellis family interactions had been dramatically revised, and we were all navigating unfamiliar territory. I suppose we should celebrate, my mother finally suggested, her tone tentatively conciliatory. The four of us haven't had lunch together in some time. This olive branch, small but significant, deserved acknowledgement. That would be nice, I replied, genuinely appreciating the gesture despite its limitations. As we prepared to leave, for a local restaurant that had been a family favorite for special occasions, my father surprised me by asking about my moving plans. When do you begin your position at Horizon? He inquired, his question lacking the dismissive tone that had previously characterized his references to my career. 3 weeks from now, I answered. I'll be flying back to Chicago this weekend to finalize apartment details and begin shipping my belongings. He nodded thoughtfully. The architectural scene in Chicago has historical significance. Sullivan, Wright, Mies van der Rohe, influential voices in American design evolution. This acknowledgement of Chicago's architectural importance, something he had previously dismissed in favor of established East Coast firms, represented a small but meaningful shift in his perception of my professional choice. Horizon's sustainability focus builds on that tradition while addressing contemporary urban challenges, I added, cautiously testing this new conversational territory. Their portfolio includes several award-winning adaptive reuse projects that honor historical elements while creating environmentally responsive spaces. To my surprise, my father engaged with this information rather than dismissing it. Adaptive reuse presents interesting structural challenges. How are they addressing foundation issues in older industrial buildings? The conversation that followed was the most genuine professional exchange we had ever shared. While he didn't explicitly endorse my career direction, his willingness to engage with it as legitimate work, rather than a disappointing deviation from family tradition, marked significant progress. At lunch, Caroline skillfully steered conversation toward neutral topics: community events, mutual acquaintances, her pregnancy preparations. The underlying tensions remained, But a new pattern was emerging: interaction based on current reality, rather than manipulation toward preferred outcomes. As we were finishing our meal, my mother set down her water glass with deliberate care. "Rebecca," she began, her tone carefully modulated, "I've been thinking about your apartment in Chicago. You mentioned exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors?" "Yes," I confirmed, surprised by her interest in these architectural details. She would normally have dismissed as inferior to contemporary finishes. "I have several pieces in storage from your grandmother's collection," she continued. "Mid-century items that might complement that aesthetic. A Saarinen side table, some Knoll textile pieces. They're not being used here, and if they would suit your space." The offer hung between us, not quite an apology, but a tangible acknowledgement of my independent life and choices. More significantly, it represented a willingness to contribute to my path rather than simply criticizing its deviation from her preferences. "That's very thoughtful," I replied, genuinely moved by this unexpected gesture. The Saarinen piece would be perfect near the windows. Caroline caught my eye across the table, her slight smile acknowledging the significance of this moment. Small as it was, this represented the beginning of a potential new relationship, one based on acceptance of differences rather than demand for conformity. After lunch, as Caroline and I walked together through the downtown shopping district, she linked her arm through mine as she had the previous day. "That went better than expected," she observed. "Baby steps," I agreed. "Though, I'm not deluding myself that everything's suddenly transformed." "Of course not," she nodded. "They're adapting to a new reality, not fundamentally changing their worldview. But adaptation can eventually lead to genuine change if it continues long enough." Her assessment was both pragmatic and hopeful, acknowledging the limitations of our progress while recognizing its potential significance over time. "What happens now?" I asked, more to myself than to her. "We've established new boundaries, but maintaining them across geographic distance will be challenging." "We maintain united communication," Caroline replied confidently. "No more divide and conquer tactics where they play us against each other. Regular check-ins between us before major family decisions. Transparency about manipulation attempts." Her strategy made perfect sense, yet something in her tone gave me pause. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? Even before the wedding photos and covenant situation?" Caroline was quiet for several steps before responding. "The comparisons and competitions wore me down too, Rebecca. Being the successful daughter came with its own suffocating expectations. Every achievement just raised the bar for the next performance." This candid admission illuminated our shared experience from a new angle. While I had envied Caroline's favored status, she had experienced it as a different kind of trap, gilded but constraining nonetheless. "Meeting James actually changed things," she continued thoughtfully. "Not because of his family connections, but because he was the first person who valued me independently of achievement or family status. He helped me recognize patterns I'd been too close to see clearly." As we paused before a bookstore window, Caroline turned to face me directly. "I want things to be different for my child. No comparisons, no conditional approval, no value measured by achievement. And I want my relationship with my sister to be based on genuine connection rather than manufactured competition." Her sincerity was unmistakable, her vulnerability a gift I hadn't expected. In that moment, standing on a sidewalk in the town, where we'd grown up under the weight of impossible expectations, something new emerged between us. The possibility of authentic relationship untethered from our parents' manipulations. "I'd like that too," I replied simply. As we continued walking, discussing plans for staying connected across the distance between Chicago and Connecticut, I realized that the covenant negotiation had catalyzed not just a shift in family power, Dynamics, but the potential healing of the sister relationship that had been our earliest casualty. The remainder of my Connecticut visit unfolded with cautious civility. My parents maintained polite interest in my Chicago plans while processing their adjustment to our new family dynamic. The evening before my departure, my father, unexpectedly, offered practical assistance, researching shipping options for transporting my remaining belongings to my new apartment. My mother contributed design suggestions for adapting grandmother's furniture pieces to my Pilsen space. These gestures, while modest, reflected their tentative acceptance of my independent path. As Caroline drove me to the airport, the morning sunlight illuminated the Connecticut landscape I had once been so desperate to escape. Now, with boundaries established and new beginnings secured, I could appreciate its beauty without feeling trapped by its limitations. "I'm thinking of visiting Chicago once you're settled," Caroline mentioned as we approached the terminal. "Maybe in a few months, before travel becomes too uncomfortable with the pregnancy. I'd like to see your new world." This offer, to step into my chosen environment rather than expecting me to continuously return to theirs, represented a meaningful shift in our relationship dynamic. "I'd like that," I replied sincerely. "There's an architectural boat tour along the Chicago River that offers fascinating perspective on the city's development history, and the food scene in Pilsen is incredible." As we said our goodbyes, Caroline embraced me with genuine warmth. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "For both of us." Boarding the plane back to Chicago, I felt lighter despite carrying more belongings than on my previous journey. The excess baggage fees seemed a small price for the psychological burdens I was leaving behind. The constant striving for impossible approval, the internalized belief in my inadequacy, the acceptance of exclusion as deserved consequence. Looking out the window as Connecticut receded beneath gathering clouds, I recognized that reconciliation doesn't always mean perfect harmony or complete transformation. Sometimes it simply means establishing mutual understanding, recognizing each other's humanity and autonomy even amid continuing differences. My parents might never fully embrace my chosen path or completely abandon their status-oriented values, but they had begun acknowledging my right to make independent choices. Caroline and I might never completely heal the competitive patterns of our childhood, but we had established new foundations for authentic connection. As the plane ascended toward Chicago and my new beginning, I understood that true reconciliation isn't about erasing past hurts or pretending differences don't exist. It's about creating space for new patterns to emerge. Patterns based on current truths rather than outdated assumptions, on mutual respect rather than power imbalance, on acceptance of differentness rather than demand for conformity. My signature, once deemed worthless on family photographs, had helped create this new reality, not through capitulation to old patterns, but through assertion of new boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me as I opened my laptop to review Horizon. Project details. My own signature on the employment contract representing promises I had made to myself rather than concessions extracted by others. Chicago welcomed me back with a chorus of urban rhythms, car horns punctuating conversations, the rumble of the L train overhead, street musicians creating impromptu concerts on corners. After the manicured silence of Westlake, Connecticut, the city's vibrant cacophony felt like authenticity made audible. This wasn't noise to be suppressed, but life expressing itself in all its messy, beautiful variants. My Pilsen apartment awaited with keys under the mat as arranged with the landlord. Stepping inside, I experienced that unique feeling of potential that empty spaces offer. Blank walls ready for personal expression, unfilled corners awaiting purpose, windows framing possibilities rather than limitations. The exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors that had horrified my mother now struck me as perfect metaphors for my new beginning. Honest materials with history and character, imperfect yet sturdy foundations for building something genuine. The emptiness wouldn't last long. My modest belongings from Connecticut would arrive next week, along with grandmother's furniture pieces, an unexpected bridge between past and future. But tonight, the apartment contained only what I had brought in my suitcases and the air mattress. Amelia had loaned me until my bed arrived. As I unpacked essentials and prepared a simple dinner from groceries purchased on the way from the airport, my phone buzzed with messages from the unexpected support network that had emerged in recent weeks. Amelia confirming our brunch plans for Sunday. Caroline sending links to pregnancy-safe travel options for her planned visit. Even my mother, sharing images of the furniture pieces being prepared for shipping with unexpectedly thoughtful notes about their historical context and design significance. Most surprising was a message from my father, a link to an article about Horizon's latest project receiving sustainability certification, with a simple comment. Appears your firm is establishing leadership in this sector. Impressive credentials. This acknowledgement, while restrained, represented significant evolution from his previous dismissal of sustainability-focused architecture as a passing trend rather than serious professional direction. Though far from enthusiastic endorsement, it offered something I had never received from him before, recognition of my chosen path's legitimacy on its own terms, rather than in comparison to his preferences. After responding to these messages, I stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the street below. Pilsen came alive differently at night. Restaurant patios filled with conversation, murals illuminated by streetlights revealing details invisible. During daylight, neighbors greeting each other with familiar warmth as they returned from work or headed out for evening activities. This vibrant, creative community had been portrayed by my parents as a concerning choice for their daughter. Yet standing here, I recognized it as precisely the environment where I could flourish professionally and personally. Monday morning. Arrived with the particular energy that accompanies new beginnings, as I dressed for my first official day at Horizon Architectural Firm, I found myself studying my reflection with unusual attention. The woman in the mirror had changed subtly yet significantly from the one who had stood frozen in Elaine Henderson's photography studio while being systematically erased from family documentation. My posture was different, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted, gaze direct rather than cautiously averted. Not dramatic transformation, but meaningful evolution, external manifestation of internal shifts in self-perception. The Horizon offices welcomed me with the warmth I had experienced during my interview. Creative energy balanced with professional purpose. Diana Patel personally introduced me to team members, emphasizing my background in community-integrated design and sustainability principles. As each colleague shared current projects and responsibilities, I noticed a consistent pattern: genuine passion for architecture's potential to address social and environmental challenges rather than merely creating prestigious landmarks for wealthy clients. We've assigned you to the Bronzeville Community Center Revitalization Project, Diana explained as she showed me to my workspace. A light-filled corner with generous desk space and current project renderings displayed on surrounding walls. Your thesis work on adaptive reuse with community engagement aligns perfectly with this initiative. The Bronzeville project represented exactly the kind of architecture I had always been drawn to, transforming a historically significant but deteriorating building into a vibrant community resource while honoring its cultural significance and incorporating environmental sustainability. This wasn't the prestigious private client work my father had insisted represented real architecture, but meaningful design that could tangibly improve people's daily lives while addressing broader challenges of urban renewal and climate responsibility. The community stakeholder meeting is Wednesday afternoon, Diana continued. You'll partner with Miguel on the presentation. He's been leading community engagement throughout the planning phase. This immediate inclusion in client-facing work, rather than relegation to background support tasks, signaled genuine respect for my capabilities, trust I hadn't needed to earn through family connections or years of proving myself within rigid hierarchies. Miguel introduced himself shortly after, a thoughtful architect in his mid-30s with an infectious enthusiasm for community-based design. I reviewed your portfolio before you joined the team, he mentioned, as he shared detailed context about the Bronzeville project. Your thesis project on water reclamation integration in public spaces gave me some ideas for the community center's roof design. Would you be interested in exploring that adaptation? This collaborative approach, ideas flowing freely without concern for hierarchy or ownership, created an immediate sense of belonging. Unlike the competitive environment I had been raised in, where acknowledgement of others' contributions somehow diminished one's own value, Horizon fostered genuine collaboration where shared success enhanced everyone's work. That first week unfolded with immersive professional engagement balanced by personal establishment in my new community. Daytime hours filled with design challenges and team collaboration gave way to evenings spent arranging my apartment, exploring Pilsen's diverse restaurants and galleries, and discovering transportation routes that would become daily rhythms. Each activity, whether professional or personal, carried the same liberating quality, choices made according to my own values, and preferences rather than external expectations or fear of disapproval. The apartment gradually transformed as my belongings arrived from Connecticut. Unpacking my modest possessions felt like reacquainting myself with artifacts from a previous life. Books that had shaped my architectural philosophy, design tools that had accompanied me through education and early career. Photographs documenting friendships and experiences my parents had deemed insignificant. Interspersed among these familiar items, grandmother's furniture pieces created unexpected harmony, their mid-century elegance complementing the industrial character of the space, while connecting me to family history in ways I could consciously choose rather than passively accept. One particular piece, a Saarinen side table my mother had mentioned, carried unexpected significance when it arrived. Carefully wrapped in protective materials was a handwritten note. "This was your grandmother, Eleanor's favorite piece. She commissioned it after visiting the TWA terminal at JFK in 1962, inspired by Saarinen's vision of architecture as both art and service. She would approve of your path. Mom." This acknowledgement, linking my architectural values to family, heritage through my grandmother rather than my father's more conventional practice, offered connection without demanding conformity. Whether my mother had intended this deeper meaning or simply shared historical context, the effect was profound. Recognition that my professional choices didn't represent rejection of family legacy, but perhaps its authentic continuation through different expression. As my first month at Horizon progressed, the Bronzeville Community Center project became central to my professional engagement. The stakeholder meeting Diana had mentioned proved transformative. Community members speaking directly about their needs and aspirations for the space, sharing historical context about the building's significance in neighborhood history, offering insights about practical functionality that academic training couldn't provide. This wasn't architecture imposed upon a community, but created in genuine partnership with those who would inhabit and utilize the space. My contribution to the roof design, adapted from my thesis work to create a system that would capture rainfall for garden irrigation while providing community gathering space, received enthusiastic response from both residents and team members. Unlike previous professional environments where recognition had been carefully rationed and achievements minimized, Horizon's culture celebrated innovation regardless of source. Diana highlighted my design during the next all-staff meeting, crediting the concept while inviting collaborative refinement. "Rebecca's water reclamation system perfectly embodies our integrated approach," she noted, displaying my preliminary sketches on the conference room screen. Environmentally responsive, community-enhancing, and visually compelling. This is exactly the kind of thinking that distinguishes Horizon's work. This public acknowledgement, professional recognition based on actual contribution rather than family connection or political positioning, validated my decision to pursue architecture on my own terms. The path my parents had dismissed as idealistic and impractical was proving both professionally fulfilling and genuinely impactful. Outside work hours, Pilsen revealed itself as the vibrant community environment I had hoped for. Unlike Westlake's carefully maintained social stratification, the neighborhood embraced diversity of background, profession, and expression. My morning. Coffee routine at a locally owned shop quickly established me as a regular, with baristas remembering my order and fellow patrons engaging in casual conversation about community events and shared interests. Evenings often found me exploring neighborhood galleries or attending community workshops on urban gardening, historical preservation, or public art initiatives. These activities, which my mother would have dismissed as trivial distractions from proper networking, created meaningful connections within my new community, relationships based on shared values and genuine interest rather than strategic advancement or social positioning. Amelia's friendship provided essential continuity during this transition period. Our Sunday brunches became weekly tradition, providing space to process professional challenges and personal adjustments with someone who understood both my history and current evolution. Unlike the performative friendships my parents had encouraged, strategic connections with appropriate peers from similar backgrounds, my relationship with Amelia offered authentic exchange without calculation. "You seem more grounded each week," she observed during one such brunch, about 6 weeks after my relocation. "Less looking over your shoulder for approval that never comes." Her observation captured something I had felt, but not articulated: the gradual relaxation that comes from living according to internal values rather than external validation. Without the constant pressure to perform family-approved achievement, I could engage more fully with actual experience rather than its potential evaluation. "I'm learning to trust my own assessment," I acknowledged. "Professional decisions, personal choices. I still hear their voices sometimes, predicting failure or disappointment, but those voices don't determine my actions anymore." "That's the real achievement," Amelia replied. "Not changing them, though. There seems to be some progress there too from what you've shared. But changing your relationship with their opinions. They can have them without you being defined by them." This distinction between changing others versus changing my response to them reflected the essential shift in my approach to family dynamics. Rather than continuously attempting to earn approval through ever-escalating achievement or conformity, I was establishing boundaries around the influence their judgments could exert on my choices and self-perception. This evolution faced its first significant test when my phone lit up with a FaceTime call from my mother on a Tuesday evening as I worked on Bronzeville design refinements at my kitchen table. We had maintained text communication since my relocation, but this was her first attempt at real-time conversation. Accepting the call, I found both parents framed in my screen, seated formally in my father's study, the room where we had negotiated the Whitfield Shores Covenant amendments. Their posture suggested this wasn't a casual check-in, but a purposeful communication. "Rebecca," my mother began with practiced pleasantness, "we wanted to see how you're settling into Chicago. The furniture pieces arrived without issue?" "They did," I confirmed, angling my phone to show the Saarinen table positioned near my windows. "They work perfectly in the space. Thank you again for sending them." My father cleared his throat, signaling transition to the call's actual purpose. "We've been speaking with Charles Morgenstern," he stated without preamble. "His firm is expanding their sustainability division in response to changing client expectations. He mentioned they would still consider your application if you found Chicago less than ideal." The implication was clear. They were offering a path back to Connecticut, to familiar control mechanisms and approved career channels, presented as generous opportunity rather than attempted reclamation of authority. 6 months ago, I might have interpreted this as genuine concern or even validation of my professional focus. Now, with clearer perspective on established patterns, I recognized it as a sophisticated attempt to re-establish the previous dynamic. My choices subject to their guidance and approval, my geographic proximity ensuring continued influence. "That's thoughtful," I replied carefully. But I'm fully engaged with Horizon and the Bronzeville Community Center project. My team values my contributions, and the work aligns perfectly with my professional goals. My mother's expression tightened, slightly. But Chicago is so far from family, Rebecca. With Caroline's baby coming in December, wouldn't it make sense to be closer? Charles's offer provides perfect justification for a professionally sound return. This appeal to family connection, positioning my independent choices as somehow disloyal to my sister and future niece or nephew, represented familiar emotional leverage. Yet Caroline herself had expressed nothing but support for my Chicago position, even planning a visit to experience my new environment. I appreciate the thought behind the suggestion, I responded, maintaining calm directness. But my professional development is thriving at Horizon. Their approach to community-integrated design and sustainability is exactly what I've been working towards since graduate school. My father's expression shifted from confident expectation to subtle frustration, as he recognized his offer wasn't being received as intended. The Morgenstern firm offers comparable professional opportunity with the significant advantage of established family connections, he persisted. Those relationships have value in long-term career advancement. They certainly can, I acknowledged, neither rejecting nor accepting his premise. Right now, I'm building relationships based on my actual work and contribution. That's providing solid foundation for my professional development. The conversation continued with additional attempts to position the Morgenstern opportunity as superior while characterizing my Horizon position as temporary stepping stone rather than legitimate career path. Throughout this exchange, I maintained boundaries without hostility, acknowledging their perspective while clearly establishing my decision's finality. As we ended the call with polite but distanced farewells, I recognized this conversation as an important milestone in our evolving relationship. I had maintained my position without defensive justification or angry rejection, simply clear assertion of my chosen path's validity, independent of their approval or understanding. This wasn't dramatic confrontation, but quiet claiming of autonomy. Foundation. Of self built on internal values rather than external validation. The signature they had needed for their retirement community documentation had created leverage for initial boundary establishment. Now, geographic distance and professional independence were strengthening those boundaries through daily choices and consistent self-definition. As Chicago's summer evening light filtered through my windows, illuminating the space I had created, according to my own aesthetic and functional preferences, I recognized that true independence isn't achieved through dramatic declarations, but through accumulation of authentic choices. Each decision building upon previous ones until new patterns emerge not as conscious rebellion but as natural expression of genuine self. 3 months into my Chicago journey, autumn painted the city with dramatic transformation. Trees along the boulevards turned brilliant shades of crimson and gold. Architectural details emerged more distinctly against crisp blue skies, and the quality of light shifted, softer, more golden, illuminating familiar buildings from new angles. This seasonal evolution mirrored my own continuing transformation from someone defined by external expectations to a person guided by authentic purpose. The Bronzeville Community Center project had progressed from conceptual design to detailed development, with my water reclamation system becoming a central feature of the building's environmental strategy. What had begun as adaptation of thesis work had evolved through collaborative refinement into an integrated system that would reduce the center's water consumption by nearly 40% while creating a rooftop garden space for community education and gatherings. Your design addresses practical function and community engagement simultaneously, Diana noted during our weekly project review. That balance is exactly what distinguishes meaningful public architecture from mere technical solution or aesthetic statement. Her observation captured precisely what had drawn me to community-focused design: the integration of practical functionality, environmental responsibility, and human experience. This wasn't architecture as monument to individual genius or statement of wealth, but thoughtful creation of spaces that enhanced daily life while addressing broader challenges. My professional growth extended beyond this single project. Diana had begun including me in preliminary meetings with potential clients whose projects aligned with my sustainability focus. Miguel had invited me to co-present our approach at a regional conference on adaptive reuse strategies. These opportunities weren't granted through family connections or political positioning, but emerged naturally from demonstrated capability and genuine contribution. The contrast with my previous professional experiences proved illuminating. Before Horizon, I had interpreted limited advancement as personal inadequacy, further evidence of the fundamental unworthiness my family dynamics had instilled. Now, with clearer perspective, I recognized how deliberately those earlier environments had restricted recognition based on metrics unrelated to actual performance: family connections, social background, compliance with unstated expectations, about appropriate ambition. This professional evolution paralleled personal growth in my new community. Pilsen had welcomed me with characteristic openness, incorporating me into neighborhood rhythms without demanding conformity to prescribed identities. Weekly farmers' markets became opportunities for connection with local vendors who gradually transitioned from polite commerce to genuine conversation, remembering my preferences and sharing stories behind their products. Community improvement initiatives, from mural restoration projects to vacant lot transformations, provided meaningful engagement beyond professional boundaries. Most significantly, I had begun volunteer work with a neighborhood program introducing architectural concepts to high school students from underrepresented backgrounds. Each Saturday morning, I joined other design professionals in workshops that evolved from basic principles to practical application, helping students envision changes in their own communities while developing skills that could create future career pathways. "You have a gift for translation," observed Teresa, the program director, after watching me explain structural concepts using simple materials and relevant examples. "You're making complex principles accessible without diminishing their significance. These students grasp fundamentals because you connect abstract ideas to their lived experience." This capacity for connection through authentic communication represented growth I hadn't anticipated. The ability to share knowledge without positioning myself as superior, to teach through collaboration rather than authority. This approach differed dramatically from the hierarchical dynamics I had observed in my father's architectural practice, where knowledge was carefully guarded and dispensed as evidence of expertise rather than shared resource for collective advancement. My apartment had gradually evolved into a genuine home, reflecting integrated identity rather than compartmentalized existence. Professional materials shared space with creative projects. Community event notifications appeared alongside work schedules. Neighborhood friends mingled with office colleagues during informal gatherings. Unlike my Connecticut existence, where personal identity had been carefully separated from professional presentation and family position, my Chicago life allowed integration of multiple aspects into coherent whole. One particular evening in late October marked significant milestone in this integration. I had invited colleagues from Horizon along with neighbors and community program volunteers for a housewarming gathering, a diverse group representing different aspects of my Chicago experience. As conversation flowed between professional discussions, neighborhood updates, and personal connections, I observed with quiet satisfaction how naturally these seemingly separate worlds interacted. Miguel and my downstairs neighbor Leon discovered shared interest in urban agriculture, exchanging contacts for community garden initiatives. Teresa from the student program engaged with Diana about potential internship pathways for program graduates. My barista friend Jade discussed public art installation possibilities with Horizon's environmental graphics designer. These interactions represented exactly the kind of community integration I had always valued in theory, but rarely experienced in practice. diverse perspectives connecting through shared values despite different backgrounds and experiences. During this gathering, my phone lit up with a FaceTime request from Caroline. Though not planned, her virtual participation seemed fitting culmination of the evening's theme of integration. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she began, then stopped as she registered the background activity. "Oh, you have people over. I can call another time." "No, it's perfect timing," I assured her, moving to a slightly quieter corner of the living room. "Just a casual housewarming with friends and colleagues. I'd love to introduce you." Over the next 15 minutes, I carried my phone around the apartment, introducing Caroline to various guests who responded with genuine warmth. Through these brief interactions, my sister gained window into the life I was building, not through formal description, but through direct observation of its texture and character. "Everyone seems so interesting," she commented afterward, her expression reflecting surprised appreciation. "And your apartment looks amazing. Those brick walls with grandmother's modern pieces, it's perfectly balanced between history and contemporary function." Her observation, free from the comparative assessment that had characterized our previous interactions, offered simple appreciation without agenda. This shift from competition to genuine interest marked important evolution in our adult relationship, connection based on authentic curiosity rather than positioned hierarchy. "How are you feeling?" I asked, noting the visible changes pregnancy had brought to her appearance. "Enormous," she laughed, angling the camera to reveal her expanded silhouette. 7 months and already feeling like I'm carrying twins, but healthy, which is what matters. James has been surprisingly attentive, installed a small refrigerator beside the bed so I don't have to navigate stairs for middle-of-the-night cravings. "That's thoughtful," I observed, genuinely pleased by this evidence of practical support rather than mere social performance. "He's been different since the covenant negotiation," Caroline confided, her expression turning reflective. "More willing to question his family's standard operating procedures rather than automatically defending them. I think seeing us establish boundaries with Mom and Dad gave him permission to reconsider some of the Whitfield family dynamics as well. This ripple effect, our boundary establishment influencing Caroline's marriage positively, represented unexpected consequence of our united stance. What had begun as necessary self-protection had created space for multiple relationship recalibrations based on more authentic interaction. "Speaking of Mom and Dad," Caroline continued, lowering her voice slightly though she was alone in her home office, "they've been processing your Chicago success in interesting ways. When the local Architectural Society newsletter featured Horizon's Bronzeville project with specific mention of your water reclamation system, Dad actually ordered extra copies. I found one on his desk with your contribution highlighted. This information surprised me. Not that the project had received recognition, which Diana had mentioned, but that my father had documented this professional validation without direct communication about it. This private acknowledgement suggested more complex processing of my independent success than his overtly dismissive stance had indicated. And Mom has been telling her friends about your innovative environmental design work without the usual qualifiers about temporary career phases or eventual return to proper East Coast firms," Caroline added. "Small changes, but noticeable shift from their previous positions." While these adjustments didn't represent dramatic transformation in their fundamental worldview, they suggested important evolution, grudging recognition that paths different from their prescribed narrative could lead to legitimate success rather than inevitable failure. This wasn't the enthusiastic approval I had once desperately sought, but something potentially more meaningful. Respect for difference without requiring agreement. After ending the call with promises about her upcoming visit, I rejoined my gathering with renewed appreciation for the multiple connections it represented. Professional colleagues, community members, neighborhood friends, and now family, all intersecting in ways that would have been impossible within the rigid social categories of my Connecticut existence. As guests gradually departed with warm exchanges and plans for future connections, I found myself in quiet conversation with Diana on my small balcony overlooking the neighborhood's nighttime landscape. The evening had cooled considerably, prompting us to wrap in light blankets as we discussed the Bronzeville Project's next community presentation. "I've been meaning to ask," Diana said during natural pause in our professional discussion. "What motivated your focus on community-integrated design? Most architects with your educational background gravitate toward more conventional career paths with established firms." The question, offered with genuine curiosity rather than evaluative judgment, invited reflection I might previously have avoided. Honest examination of motivations rather than careful construction of acceptable narrative. I grew up in an environment where value was determined by external metrics, appearance, achievement, social position, I explained, surprised by my own candor. Architecture was presented as means to establish prestige rather than create meaningful impact. The more I studied design history, the more I recognized how that approach has created beautiful buildings that often fail to serve actual human needs or address environmental realities. Diana nodded thoughtfully. The profession has long history of prioritizing monument over function, particularly in certain geographical and social contexts. Exactly, I agreed. I became increasingly drawn to design that emerges from actual community needs, rather than imposed aesthetic or social statement. Buildings that solve practical problems while creating beautiful, sustainable spaces for everyday experience. That perspective is unfortunately still rare among architects from privileged backgrounds, Diana observed without accusation. The profession loses valuable talent when young designers from diverse socioeconomic experiences can't access education or opportunity, while those with access often remain disconnected from broader community needs. Her observation captured precisely the disconnection I had observed in my father's practice and the firms my parents had pushed me toward. Architectural creation separated from lived experience of those who would inhabit the spaces, design serving, social positioning rather than human function. I've been fortunate to find an environment where that integrated approach is valued, I acknowledged, gesturing toward the now empty apartment where diverse connections had flourished throughout the evening, both professionally and personally. Diana smiled, understanding the broader meaning behind my words. Those connections aren't accidental, Rebecca. You've actively built them through consistent engagement and authentic presence. That's as much your creation as any building design. Her observation illuminated aspect of my Chicago experience I hadn't fully articulated: the deliberate construction of community and purpose through daily choices and consistent values. Unlike the passive acceptance of assigned roles that had characterized my Connecticut existence, my Chicago life represented active creation based on genuine priorities and meaningful connection. As Diana departed with warm thanks for the evening, I remained on the balcony watching neighborhood lights and listening to the city's nighttime rhythms. The contrast between my current sense of integrated purpose and previous fragmented existence felt particularly clear in this moment of quiet reflection. The professional recognition my father had privately documented, the community connections that had formed through genuine engagement, the evolving family dynamics that allowed appreciation without control, all represented ripple effects from that pivotal moment when I had refused further erasure and claimed my own signature's worth. What had begun as necessary boundary establishment during the covenant negotiation had evolved into comprehensive life recalibration. Professional purpose aligned with personal values, community engagement reflecting genuine priorities, relationship, dynamics based on mutual respect rather than positioned hierarchy. This wasn't the dramatic transformation of inspirational narratives, sudden revelation leading to complete reinvention, but the more sustainable evolution that emerges through consistent choices aligned with authentic values. Each decision, building upon previous ones, creating momentum toward integrated identity and purposeful engagement that continuous external validation could never provide. As Chicago's autumn night enveloped the neighborhood in gentle darkness, I recognized that true success isn't measured through others' assessment or comparative positioning, but through alignment between internal values and external action, congruence that creates not just achievement, but meaning. The Chicago winter arrived with dramatic intensity, lake-effect snow transforming the urban landscape overnight, temperatures plunging to levels that made my New England upbringing seem mild by comparison. Yet amid this physical transformation, I found unexpected beauty. The architecture I'd admired in autumn sunlight revealed new character beneath crystalline frost and snow-laden detail. Pilsen's vibrant murals contrasted brilliantly against white blanketed streets, their colors more vivid against the monochromatic backdrop. My professional responsibilities at Horizon had expanded significantly as the Bronzeville Community Center project entered final development phases. The water reclamation system had evolved beyond my initial concept, incorporating community feedback and engineering refinements to create an integrated solution that balanced environmental performance with practical usability. The board has approved Phase 2 funding based largely on your sustainability integration, Diana informed me during our December project review. They were particularly impressed by how the system addresses both environmental objectives and community needs through participatory maintenance design. This recognition stemmed from a recent innovation I developed after listening to community. Stakeholders expressed concerns about technical maintenance requirements. Rather than creating a system requiring specialized knowledge, I'd redesigned components to incorporate educational elements, allowing local students to participate in system monitoring and basic maintenance as part of environmental science education programs. We'd like you to lead the sustainability team for the Southeast Cultural District renewal, Diana continued. Based on your performance with Bronzeville, the partners believe you're ready for project leadership. This promotion, offered based on demonstrated capability rather than time served or political positioning, represented validation of both my technical approach and community engagement philosophy. The Southeast Cultural District represented major investment in historically underserved neighborhoods, creating integrated cultural spaces that would preserve community identity while addressing infrastructure needs. That's significant. Responsibility, I responded, momentarily overwhelmed by the opportunity's scope. Diana smiled with understanding. You're ready for this, Rebecca? Your integrated approach is exactly what this project requires. Technical expertise balanced with genuine community engagement. You've consistently demonstrated both. Her confidence reflected Horizon's fundamental values, advancement-based, on actual contribution rather than prescribed timelines or hierarchical positioning. Unlike my previous professional experiences, where opportunity had been carefully rationed according to unspoken rules about appropriate progression, Horizon evaluated capability through demonstrated performance rather than arbitrary metrics. As I prepared for holiday break, Horizon closed between Christmas and New Year's, allowing staff genuine disconnection, my thoughts turned toward Connecticut. Caroline was now 8 months pregnant, due in mid-January with a baby girl. Despite her condition, she had maintained our connection through regular video calls and thoughtful messages, sharing pregnancy updates while showing genuine interest in my professional and personal developments. My parents had maintained more distant communication, occasional texts and formal emails sharing family news without substantive engagement. Their adjustment to our recalibrated relationship continued gradually, recognizing my independence without fully embracing the values driving my choices. This measured evolution felt appropriate, allowing authentic change to develop naturally rather than demanding performed transformation. The question of holiday plans loomed increasingly large as December progressed. Previous years had followed rigid tradition, formal Christmas Eve dinner at my parents' home, obligatory attendance at Christmas morning gift exchange, requisite, appearance at the Westlake Country Club holiday reception. These events had always doubled as performance assessments, with subtle evaluation of appearance, achievement, and appropriate social engagement. This year, however, circumstances had changed significantly. My establishment in Chicago created legitimate geographic barrier to automatic participation. My professional responsibilities included year-end documentation that required attention even during official closure. Most significantly, my internal relationship with obligation had transformed, family participation representing choice rather than unquestioned requirement. As I completed final pre-holiday project submissions, my phone signaled an incoming call from an unexpected source, my father, whose communication had been limited to occasional group texts and formal emails since my relocation. "Rebecca," he began without preliminary greeting, his tone characteristically direct, but lacking the usual undertone of evaluation. "Your mother and I have been discussing Christmas arrangements." I prepared myself for the standard recitation of expectations thinly disguised as invitation, the implicit assumption that family obligation would naturally override any competing priorities. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.